Welcome to Leadership Mindsets with Catherine Martins. I talk to all kinds of leaders about how they think. This is a chance to broaden our ideas of leadership and hear from leaders about how they successfully inspire and motivate others on a daily basis. We'll hear their stories, the joys and triumphs, and the challenges of leadership. It's my hope that as we get an insight behind the scenes of how these leaders think, as we hear their stories of choosing bravery, humility, and morality, that we will all be inspired to reflect a little deeper about the way that we think too. And as we challenge ourselves to also have healthy mindsets. My guest today is Andrew Mellor from Healthy Teams. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, thank you, Catherine. Great to be on the show with you.
Yeah. Tell us, what is Healthy Teams?
What is Healthy Teams? I think we all want to be part of a healthy team. A team that's, vibrant. It's got a mission that is something that everybody as part of the team thinks is a really worthwhile mission. But also one where there's a sense of belonging, a sense that there's contribution that you're making to that team, making to that mission. And yeah, you're basically on a journey together, sometimes feeling like heroes, sometimes feeling like failures, but at least failing together and learning together, which is the big thing. So yeah, building teams where people feel safe, but also moving towards their goal. That's what a healthy team is.
Right. So yeah, that's a healthy team. And how do you help healthy teams, if that's your business name?
Yeah. So I'm the principal consultant for Healthy Teams, and basically we help whether it's business owners through to might be managers, leaders within an organization. They bring us in, and we can run seminars with managers to help them work through what does creating a psychologically safe environment look like for them as a leader, so that they're getting that contribution and that involvement from their team, through to coaching of those managers and leaders, and running workshops, seminars, yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, that's how we met, isn't it? Because we're in the same game.
That's right.
It is such a joy to do it, isn't it? To see leaders go from that place of uncertainty. They've got these people in their team. They're not quite sure, how to work with some of them because they're so different from themselves, to then bring them to a place where they realize actually the value of that diversity and the joy it is to have all those different strengths on their teams. And I think, am I understanding correctly that you also then are there in situ working with all the individuals of the teams as well, not just the leaders? So you do actually help them to understand each other?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the ideal. I mean, it really depends whether I'm working in a short-term sort of seminar framework or whether it's a longer term thing. But yeah, definitely working. If you're talking about team members, I mean, one of the real revelations is that not everyone thinks like me, and that's okay. A big challenge is the way that we process information and then act on it. Someone like myself, I'm quite comfortable talking out loud, and my wife and I sometimes will like butt heads on this because like I'll say something and I was just processing it. I definitely hadn't confirmed that was my way of thinking. Just that was what I was thinking about. And she might think that that's actually what my thoughts are on the matter or my final thoughts on the matter. But I regularly process out loud. She'd be someone who's far more deliberate internally and would speak once she's already worked out what she actually thinks about an issue.
And
those, yeah.
No, go on.
Oh, those sorts of dynamics are happening all the time inside teams. That's just one example.
And I speak to that example because I think there'd be a lot of listeners right now who would relate to that, not just only in their marriages, but also in their teams. And what you've actually described, which you're probably aware of, is the exact description of the introvert extrovert within the Myers-Briggs personality profiling.
Yep.
So an introvert needs time to process their thoughts before they speak them, and they need time to regroup their energies. Whereas an extrovert is quite the opposite. They'll actually do out loud processing, and they need a sounding board or, those sorts of situations where they can have someone to toss around all their thoughts as a way of dealing with them. And you most definitely in any team are going to have a mixture of introverts and extroverts, aren't you?
Absolutely. And I think helping, once you start to understand the differences in how people approach things, you're really then asking what do we actually want to achieve at the end of this? What are we actually on about? Because rarely, I mean, speed might be helpful, speed of making a decision, helpful in some circumstances, but rarely is it the be all and end all. And, taking that extra time to allow for someone who might be more introverted to bring the gold out that they're really been ruminating on is worth, it's really worth that sacrifice of a bit of speed and time.
Yeah, yeah. I suspect quite a number of our listeners are probably aware of things like, the love languages, where, we get taught to not just offer love in a way that we're used to and want to receive it, but in the way that that person wants it and needs to receive it. Well, it's similar when you're in team leadership, isn't it? That you have to actually think about, well, what does that individual need so that I can empower them and get the most out of them as well as for their own sake.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily would be the same for your personality. And that's a big shift.
It's a huge shift.
Isn't
it?
And
I think, that really comes down to, I think one of my key tenets is that it's not about you and what you can do. Otherwise you're not a leader. You're just, you're a contributor if you know what you can do, but a leader is really somebody who understands and appreciates that others can do a lot more than they can do on their own. And if you appreciate that, then your whole mindset shifts. And exactly like you said, it becomes how am I empowering others? And that becomes a question of then, how am I showing love to others? How am I caring? And it can't be just how I like to care for people. It needs to be how they receive it and how they appreciate it.
Yes, yes. Oh, it's always such a joy talking to you, Andrew, because I know we're talking the same language.
It is.
Tell me, Andrew, how did you get to be running healthy teams? Give us a little bit of your story, your background.
Yeah, I mean, in brief, studied a Bachelor of Economics at university, but while I was there, got very involved with a Christian group, which was really helpful for me, just exploring, my own faith, and that really led me on a journey to becoming quite convinced on Jesus and the Christian faith. And then I actually worked with that organization, and I committed for, I think it was only 3 years, but it ended up being 10 years that I worked there. So it was a fair amount of time. And I guess I always showed leadership capacity throughout that time and slowly got opportunities to lead. One of the first memories, though, of leading started off great. It was running a project for during the schoolies period down in Victoria. So it wasn't the big schoolies up in the Gold Coast. It was schoolies down on the south coast of Victoria on the Great Ocean Road. And we ran like a drop-in centre and ran a whole bunch of services for schoolies just to help them be safe and help them from being isolated and vulnerable. And during that time, the students we brought down had a great time, and the feedback I got from them at the end of it was just how amazing time it was. And I was just buzzing as a leader. I just thought, gee, I'm good at this, like nailed it. Yeah. And then I started to get feedback and some formal feedback in sort of written surveys and stuff from the staff that were on the team, and it was the opposite. I mean, it hit me like a truck. I was kind of completely blindsided, but people felt like they were not involved, that I changed plans constantly. There was no predictability, no sense of what they were meant to be doing, that they were just kind of, no one said slaves, but they just were basically being told what to do and when to do it on the drop of a hat. And essentially the experience for staff was the exact opposite. I mean, they hated it. It was one of the worst projects they'd been on. And that was, it just blindsided me. It really, really hurt initially. But I think what was really confronting was just how could I be so blind to that? Like, I really thought I'd done a great job. So I started to reflect on that. And I mean, a big part of that was what we talked about before the break, which was, it's not about me. And I really led from the front and ran with the vibe that I had, and I just didn't empower anybody else in my staff team to really engage and bring their skills and abilities, which I really needed. Like I said, it was very ad hoc and very chaotic. So that was a big lesson. And then fast forward, I mean, it wasn't all failures, but fast forward a couple of years, and I was actually leading this campus team in Sydney now. So at Sydney Uni and Notre Dame Uni. And I had a team of 3 staff. 2 of them were just on a 1 year sort of, trying it out for a year. The other one was kind of a long timer. At the end of that year, that first year of my leadership, I had 0 staff. And again, this time around, it wasn't that they were unhappy. Like I'm still friends with them. I think they felt very seen, very cared for, nurtured, etc. But this time around, I didn't really provide a vision or clarity around where we were going, where the organization, where this campus ministry was going. And I don't know, they never articulated it to me exactly in those words, but, reflecting later, I think I just didn't offer something compelling to be part of in the long term. And
I'm hearing such great reflection there. That is how we learn. You're open to the feedback. You didn't just receive it, both in the 2 stories you've told so far. I suspect there's some more coming yet in the story, but I just want to jump in there and affirm that it's that very process of being open to feedback and then choosing to reflect on it. That's how we grow and become better as people, but as leaders. And it's being open to that, which I'm hearing as a strength of yours, even though you're telling a story of where you feel like you may have failed. So thank you for your vulnerability. I don't know about our listeners, but I'm certainly all ears. I'm just excited to hear that you didn't give up, that you showed resilience, that you allowed those stories to be ones that you reflected on and that you grew from. Jump in there and also say that the measurement of numbers when it comes to something like a spiritual leadership role, like you're describing, can be fraught as well, can't it? Because I know that there's a lot of listeners who are in roles similar to that right now. Either they're in a church or an organisation, in a campus. And it's easy to look at the numbers and count those and go, I must be in a fruitful ministry because there's now X number of people involved or people on my team. But is that really the only measurement of success in that environment? Just throwing that in there.
No, that's really good, Catherine. Listen, I'll play devil's advocate just for a moment, and that's very appropriate given the spiritual context. I think appropriately, there is sort of for things to grow can be a healthy thing, right? Like it shows that lives are being impacted, and that's a positive. I think that's generally a positive thing. I think the big lesson for me, and again, lengthy reflection, looking back now, sort of more than 10 years later, I can just see God had real intention for me, to grow me, to develop me. And looking inside the Bible, as I mentioned, but also just reading autobiographies and biographies of people who've made a difference in the world and impacted lives. It's pretty rare to find a story that goes from 0 to 100 in a straight line. Yeah. There's usually something that in anybody's books would be considered outright failure. And you sort of wonder, why did anyone trust them again, So for me, that was definitely a moment for me that was a bit like that.
Yeah. And what happened then? You handed over your ministry.
Yeah.
And then what did you do next?
Yeah, so I then got involved with a coaching program. In short, it was called Max Potential, a great program. It still exists. And we would coach business leaders in a particular geographic location. So I was out in Penrith in the Greater Sydney area, and we would coach them. But as part of the deal, they would then mentor and coach a Year 10 student through a series of sort of development things, and then they would actually deliver a community service project as part of that, the student. So it was a great little program. I ran it for a number of cycles. It was very hard to make a living out of. So I couldn't do it long term, or at least I didn't have the skills at that stage to know how to make a living out of it. So it was a great experience, but moved on without any sense at all of what I was meant to be doing. The best I had was my pastor thought it would be a really good idea for me to do some further study, so to do a master's degree. Ended up doing a Master of Arts, and I had one eye on the exit door because I was just like, I don't know why I'm here. So on the way to my first class, just had a real clear sense of like, okay, how long have I got before I have to pay for this so I can test this and get out if I need to. But within an hour of class starting, I was just loving it. And yeah, maybe that's another key lesson as well, is like I needed refreshment as a leader, as somebody giving. I just needed to sit in an environment where, yes, you get tested in school, in uni, but it's not really like the tests are just for you, right? Like they're just they're not real. They're simulations really. And I needed that. I just needed a space where I could just throw around ideas and it didn't have to have real world consequences, right there and then. And so I did a master's degree over about 2 years, and worked a little bit as well, did some tutoring, sort of odd jobs through that period. And yeah, it was a really necessary time for me.
Yeah, that brings up that whole topic of professional development for you and for everyone who's in any sort of leadership role. Master's study or tertiary study is one type of that, but there's all sorts of things around now.
Absolutely.
There's courses.
There's so many micro things you can do now.
Yeah, workshops, including the ones you run. Coaching with either of us.
That's right.
Lots of ways that these days people can get professional development.
Absolutely.
And it certainly helps us stimulate our thinking. I loved how you described when you were in that professional development context, in this case uni, but this is true of all those sorts of things, that it provided you a safe space to toss around ideas that weren't necessarily ones that were real, because sometimes tossing around those ideas with our actual team, and I've experienced this because I'm a real ideas girl as well, it freaks everyone else out.
Yeah, you can. Absolutely. You need those safe spaces always, but sometimes you need a longer season of just safety.
Our team members, they don't understand when you're just talking about an idea. They think every time you mention an idea, that's what's happening, that's what they're going to have to do, and it worries them. And it's great to have a space outside of your team where you can go, go this way, go that way.
That's right. No, absolutely. I mean, I learned to preface when I was going on like a bit of a tangential kind of brainstorm. I learned to always preface it. I don't believe this stuff. I'm just talking right now, just in case there was anybody who might latch onto it. So
I had a friend many years ago twig to that this is how I work sometimes, and they say, oh, hang on, is this a putty plan? And I love that. I'm like, yes, right. So sometimes I even now use that language. I say, okay, these are putty plans. I just want your thoughts, your ideas, and they don't think this is actually the next vision or adventure that we're going on.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm keen to hear, Andrew, though, I guess this last chapter of the story, bringing us up to today. You had your hard times in leadership. You went back to do some more study, had a break, recouped, and somewhere between then and now, you're running healthy teams. What happened in the middle?
Yeah, so essentially, I ended up becoming director of student services and then student experience for that college that I was working at. So it's now Alfred Crucis University College, and that was there was an open door that sort of came about. I was doing some tutoring and some casual lecturing there, and an open door, and I decided to walk through it, and I didn't know what to expect, but all I can say is that the preceding, I mean, lots of little ups and downs, but the preceding sort of 6 years were really sort of golden years. Just really had so much fun, led just terrific people, a really diverse set of people, and really kicked some goals. We were able to maintain student support satisfaction in sort of the national accredited survey that goes out to all students of all tertiary education providers. We were about 10 percentage points higher than the average. So really leading the way there, and coming up with some great innovations in the team. Even using a bit of AI early on in sort of 2018.
Some of the first adopters of that, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not terrifically technologically brilliant, but we had some great IT people around that helped implement some things there. So anyway, it was just really quality, and I feel as though so many of the hard fought lessons I got to apply. Learning to empower, to that it's not me at the front that really matters. That it's actually empowering others, lifting them up, and multiplying, your own ability by 10s, 20s, 30s, 100s, in terms of, the factor of power when you lead others well and empower them and give them a reason for wanting to contribute. And then on the other side, also recognizing that no one else is going to give that vision, though, that there is a place for a leader to stand up in front of people and say, this is where we're going. And I think learning how those two things go together. And it was just a wonderful time to start to be able to do that. And then that brings me to sort of just a little less than a year ago, and feeling the challenge after 6 years in that role, to go out and help others learn those lessons, maybe without as many hardships along the way. And so creating healthy teams, and that's been, enormously fun, but a big challenge, a big step of faith, because one of the first things I realized was, I don't have an amazing team now to depend on. I'd become so used to, leading through an amazing team, and it was suddenly like, it's me, and I've got to build partnerships. I've got to learn how to do some stuff myself and be a bit more scrappy again. So, yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, there is a great sense of mutual support when you work within a team environment.
Absolutely.
When you're sole traders, of which we both are, that's when we do need to look more for that external support. And I know that there's a lot of people listening who do run their own small businesses. This could even be playing while they're at work, in the workshop or wherever they are. Any kind of tips you want to leave them with about, making sure they do connect?
Catherine does some great business coaching.
There's always business coaching with either of us, yes. Well, any other ideas as well?
Yeah, no, listen, I think definitely, okay, so some things that have really helped for me. So I've got an informal, I call it an informal board of directors. And to give you an idea of how informal it is, they're all friends, people who I know well. I know that they're in my corner. And but they also, each of them has a very specific area of expertise, which I need. And so that's been immensely helpful for me, meeting with them once a quarter. And it's informal, so there's nothing legal about it, which is also helpful because I don't need those extra overheads at this stage. It's just a great support and a good challenge, a good prodding. Again, yeah, coaching is fantastic. I've had 2 coaches, even just over this last year, one focusing primarily on business, the other helping me just get my mindset right. One of them you had on your show, I believe, Jody Kubo. Right. I think coaching is a tremendous way to get unstuck faster. That's probably what I've found it to be most helpful. It's amazing how easy it's been to fall into a spiral, particularly when you are doing it largely alone. For me, that's been maybe the biggest surprise for me, and the biggest learning is just how quickly I can go into a spiral, and I need to bounce things around with people and talk with people that can help me get a level head again and see things clearly again.
Yes. I've often said we're not designed to do things on our own. We were always designed to do things together. We need each other. We need relationship. So there's some really great ideas of how you can get that if you do feel a bit isolated as a leader and you're on your own out there working. Another one I am using myself right now, and I'm loving being at a point where I can do it, and that's contractors. So social media for me was just a headache. So now I've got someone else who can manage that for me. And then I can talk with someone else about that as well, or your website or your marketing, whatever else it is, get some contractors, pay for other people,
Absolutely.
so that you can get on with what you do.
I think, yeah, I mean, my flow for that I love, I haven't got to the last part yet, but this is the ideal. Definitely done the first part, is like learn just enough so you don't have the wool pulled over your eyes. So you know enough about that area that you know what is reasonable to pay for and what a good result is. And then absolutely, like if it's not your lane, get somebody in there who loves it, and it's going to be a great synergy. And then the part that I'm hopeful for in the future is they might become employees down the road. If things keep growing, it's a great way to build a working relationship that works before actually taking the plunge and bringing on somebody permanent.
Well, these days there's Airtasker. You can get virtual admin assistants. You can pretty much get anyone to do anything on an hourly basis. And it just helps you to then have someone else to work with. There's an added bonus to that as well.
That's right.
Well, Andrew, it's been just great. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And I really hope that we can have you back again if you're willing. I feel like we only just got started and there's so many things we could talk about. So everyone, tune in again next time. You've been listening to Leadership Mindsets with Catherine Martins, and we've had great chat today with Andrew Mellor from Healthy Teams. In the meantime, dig deep, challenge yourself, and choose a healthy mindset.